My name is Samantha Peters. I do work day-to-day as a pen tester. All right, what is Burp Suite? Burp Suite is a comprehensive collection of security tools for web app and API testing. You all probably already knew that, but we're just going to go over everything. And basically, whatever you proxy through Burp Suite, you're going to see the full request, response, headers, cookies. You're going to see all these hidden little JS files load, redirects. Sometimes seeing the redirects is really helpful information. And we're just going to go through setting up Burp Suite on Firefox because it is the basics for setting it up on everything else. So in Burp Suite, you'll navigate to the proxy listeners, add or edit a proxy listener, set whatever port you want in the bind to port. Oh, is it? Yeah, you can see it all. And then just keep it on loopback only and OK. And then in Firefox, you'll navigate to the connection settings, set your manual proxy as 127.0.0.1 because we set it on loopback only. Put the same port in that you put on Burp Suite and use this as proxy for HTTPS. If you did everything correctly at this point, if you browse to http://Burp Suite, you'll see the Burp Suite landing page. The button in the top right that doesn't really look like a button will allow you to download the CA certificate. We're going to download that. And then we'll go to the Certificate Manager, the Authorities tab, and import that CA certificate that we just downloaded. And assuming that everything worked correctly and you trust this, now everything that you browse on Firefox will show up in Burp Suite. But let's move on to some new stuff. So I wanted to put together this short presentation because I've noticed a conception in the community that Burp Suite is really just for web browsers. And if it's not a web browser, you need to look at a different tool to use. But in a lot of cases, that's not true. You could use proxy chains and proxy everything through Burp Suite, any command. But I will just be going over Postman, Python, and iPhone as a quick example. Postman is a great API platform that lets you create, save, and share API calls. You can also save and share environmental variables, which will essentially let you save or share a password or API key without actually sharing the password or API key. So that's great for security. And the basic usage, pretty straightforward. Put the target URL, API call in the top there. You're going to put your headers and bodies in the middle. In this case, we're just doing a basic auth JSON. And if that works correctly, when you send it, you'll get your response in the bottom, which in this case is a JWT. And same thing in Burp Suite again. We're going to set the proxy listener, but just a quick note that you can actually have multiple tools running at the same time. I've noticed a lot of people don't seem to take advantage of this. You can set as many listeners as you want and run as many tools as you want at the same time. Set the port to whatever you want, keep it on loopback only, and you're good to go. And then in Postman, we're going to browse to the Proxy tab, add custom proxy 127.0.0.1 again. Set the same port that you set in Burp Suite. That's important. And if you did everything correctly, now whatever you run through Postman will actually show up in Burp Suite. So you get all this nice data in Burp Suite. You'll see that the user agent is Postman runtime, and we got the exact same JWT. If you do happen to run into a certificate error, you can just go to the general settings and disable the certificate check, which is probably what most people are going to do. But you can also go to the certificate tab and just import the CA certificate just with Firefox. And at this point, you may be saying, but why do I actually care? Right? I can just use the dev tools to see headers or cookies. I can use Postman to see what Postman's doing. The short answer is if you proxy it through Burp Suite, you now get the access to Burp Suite's tools. So you get, repeater, intruder, comparer, decoder, the massive extension library made by the community. But possibly more importantly is if you're running a pen test, you need to be documenting everything. So if you're running Burp Suite as a project, and then you run all your tools through Burp Suite, and you now have a single point of location, a single location for all of your documentation and artifacting, which can really save you a ton of time in the future if you have to go back and pull that data. You probably all already know what Python is, fast, easy to learn scripting language. Here's a little one-line hello world. What's great about Python is whatever you tell it to do, it's going to try to do, or it's going to crash your computer trying to do it. It doesn't care about void main or whatever that is. And with only 2 lines of code, we can actually crack some pretty significant encryption, as I've heard people call it. All right, at this point, we're not going to go through setting up the proxy listener again, same as Firefox and Postman. And there are multiple ways to proxy with Python. We'll go over two, but this is probably the most comprehensive. You can see on lines 3 and 4, we import OS and import request. That's just me telling Python to use code that somebody smarter than me already wrote. And then on line 6 through 9 is where we're actually setting the proxy, right? You can see there we do the 127.0.0.1 and the port that we set in Burp Suite. And that is actually setting your operating system's environmental variables. So while this script is running, it's going to use those. It's going to get proxied to Burp Suite. Line 11 is the request.get. That's the actual sending traffic. So that's like a curl or a wget. And if you do get a proxy not reachable at this phase, that means you did not set up your proxy in Burp Suite. And if you get a certificate error, you can just put verified equals false, like on line 14. Or if you really want to go above and beyond, you can try to add the CA certificate to your operating system's certificate store. But that is out of the scope for today. All right, and another way you can proxy with Python, if you don't want to import the OS module, which in a lot of environments can be considered a security risk because that kind of lets you do whatever you want, you can just proxy with the request module. Also, the benefit of this is you can tell it to proxy only the specific requests you want. You just set the dictionary. You can see lines 5 through 8, we're just setting a dictionary. We pass that as an argument into request, and that request will get proxied. And you can just see there, you get the user agent, Python request, get all the data that you want. And just as a fun little project, I decided to do this 6-line dir buster. On line 3, it just pulls in a dictionary, 1 item per line. We do a for loop, and we're appending that to the end of the target URL, right? So we're just going through that. In this case, we're doing a retired hack the box machine. And what's really key here is that I'm not doing any coding at all for any error catching, try, or response. If it's a 403, 500, I don't care. I don't have to write anything. 6 lines, and I get a nicely sorted, highlightable, right, searchable list in Burp Suite. Saves a ton of time. You can see pretty quickly /invite/login is probably interesting because it comes up with a different title. /API is probably interesting because it comes up with a different status code. So, and that took 10 minutes. All right, so just for clarification, you can absolutely do this with Android as well, but I own an iPhone, so that's what I had for the presentation. And it is going to be a little different, but we're going to configure the proxy in Burp Suite, get both of the devices on the same Wi-Fi SSID, configure the proxy on the iPhone, and then install the CA certificate. And all these steps are going to be a little different than before. So setting up the proxy listener, this time we're actually going to choose all interfaces instead of loopback only, because that allows it to get the traffic from other devices on the network. And in this case, your iPhone literally is another device on the network. Then on your iPhone, you're going to make sure you're on the same SSID as the computer running Burp Suite. You're going to disable your cell data to make sure it's actually going over the Wi-Fi. And then go into the little blue eye, which takes you to the SSID settings. And you'll have to scroll down forever. The iPhone has so many settings. But eventually you will get to configure proxy and choose manual proxy. And then here's a little change for the server. Don't put 127.0.0.1. You need to put the RFC 1918 address of the computer running Burp Suite because that's where you want the traffic to go. And then the same port is in the Burp Suite listener. And if you did everything correctly, just like Firefox, you'll get the Burp Suite landing page. And as you guessed it, we're going to download the CA certificate from the top right. The only difference is that the iPhone will prompt for all these like security things because Apple's, all about security. In this case, I didn't even know this was going to happen, but it picked up my iWatch or my Apple Watch and asked me if I wanted to do that. So maybe try that after this. I chose iPhone. If you did everything correct, when you go back to the general settings in the iPhone, you'll see this profile downloaded. And this is where you need to be really careful because if you were looking at some shady website last night, this could be a different certificate that's been sitting there waiting for you. So make sure this is actually the Portswigger CA, it's verified, and this is what you want to install. And then install, it'll probably ask you for a passcode at that point. And here's just a quick little demo, hopefully. Yeah. Here's just a quick little demo of me opening one of those popular free-to-play apps on my phone and just letting it sit in the background. I'm not even touching it. And you can see there are a lot of posts in there. I don't know where my data's going, but it's going somewhere. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns? The question was, have you tried this with PowerShell? I have not tried it with PowerShell. To be honest, I am more of a Linux Mac user. I have done it with Rust, but I had to cut this down to 15 minutes. It's actually fairly simple with Rust. I'm sure it's possible with PowerShell, but I have not done that yet. Yes, in the back.
Once this is installed, does it work more than just on Safari?
Once this is installed, does it work on more than?
So like, I mean, on your iPhone.
On the iPhone, yes.
Yeah, so when you go to other applications on the mobile device.
Right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So what I showed there was actually Candy Crush starting up. And why I started actually researching all this was because I was trying to see if I could capture Signal traffic, which I could not. Signal will detect the man in the middle, and you cannot get it. However, Discord, you can get everything on Discord, and it's in clear text. So that's interesting. But yes, it'll capture everything that doesn't detect a man in the middle proxy in the application.